It's everywhere. And I think for the first time, we are truly seeing evil reveal itself.
Yep.
It's all been living in the shadows, right? It's all
Mhm.
been living in the shadows for this whole time. None of us knew the depths of depravity that were going on, the amounts and levels of cover up.
Yep.
But it's all coming out, whether they like it or not.
Hold on, let's make sure that actually sinks in. New government files have surfaced, reportedly naming specific celebrities connected to Jeffrey Epstein. And now, several individuals linked to those same files have already left the country. This isn't just internet speculation about what might happen someday. We're talking about leaked names followed by sudden international travel patterns. Recent reports have placed Leonardo DiCaprio in Italy, while Jennifer Lopez has reportedly been staying at a luxury villa in France. Others have been spotted spending extended time around Saint-Tropez. At the same time, the government is still holding back hundreds of thousands of unreleased pages. Meanwhile, the Department of Justice has already published flight logs, emails, and photos connecting powerful figures to Jeffrey Epstein. So naturally, one question keeps coming up. If these celebrities have nothing to hide, why leave before the full files are released? And why relocate to places like France and Italy, countries where U.S. extradition can become far more complicated?
And when it came to Maxwell, it was about the idea, right? They would bring these girls in and then they would have them recruit other girls. And that was kind of the network that was being built up. From a prosecutorial point of view, from a legal point of view, if somebody's looking at this and saying, wait a minute, I'm looking at these filings and they're identifying certain people or they're redacting certain other people. And they say, there's not enough evidence to charge this person or limited evidence regarding involvement. What does that mean? So for a layperson.
Now, here's what the government is officially saying. The Department of Justice maintains that there is no client list. Attorney General Pam Bondi has publicly stated that everything that could be released has already been made available, and that the remaining files contain nothing beyond what is already known. That's the official narrative. But then you look at what's actually happening. Italy, France, Saint-Tropez. These aren't exactly quick getaway destinations for a short vacation. These are places where extradition laws can make it easier to stay put while controversy unfolds elsewhere. Even more interesting, the names reportedly seen overseas seem to align closely with those appearing in recent document leaks. That's not something people can easily ignore. So we're left with two possibilities. Either the government is being completely transparent, and a wave of celebrities just happened to leave the country for no reason, or there's more in those unreleased files than we're being told. And those who know are putting distance between themselves and what's coming next. Neither explanation is comfortable. What makes this situation feel different from typical online rumors is that the documents themselves are real. The DOJ has released millions of pages under the Epstein Files Transparency Act. And within those files are verifiable records. Flight logs show that Donald Trump flew on Epstein's plane multiple times between 1993 and 1997. That's not speculation. That's documented evidence. There's also a 2016 email reportedly sent by Mehmet Oz, inviting Jeffrey Epstein to a Valentine's event years after Epstein had already been registered as an offender. Today, Dr. Oz holds a major government position under the same administration that once promised to drain the swamp. These details ground the story in reality. The documents exist. The connections are documented. So the real issue isn't whether the leaks are real. It's what's still hidden inside the files the public hasn't seen yet.
We can tell you the top line here is that there's no client list, according to Ghislaine Maxwell, and there are no high-powered individuals that were on any sort of list. She did not incriminate anybody in that 9-hour interview that she did with the deputy attorney.
Think about the contradiction for a moment. The DOJ says there's no client list. Victims insist that a list does exist. Lawmakers who once demanded transparency are now warning that full disclosure could harm victims. And at the same time, celebrities named in these documents aren't staying to defend themselves. They're leaving. At some point you have to ask which part of this story isn't being told clearly. Is the government protecting powerful figures? Because that would be a scandal big enough to shake trust in the system for years. Or are multiple high-profile individuals abandoning their homes, careers, and public lives purely by coincidence? That explanation becomes harder to accept when you factor in flight logs, emails, and the specific destinations being chosen. And then there's the political pressure building behind the scenes. Representatives Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna introduced a discharge petition to force a House vote on releasing the full Epstein files. The number that matters is 218. That's how many signatures are needed. As of early September, the petition had reached 216. Just 2 more signatures could force the vote. 2 people stand between the public and whatever is still hidden. Meanwhile, victims are refusing to stay silent. At a press conference in Washington, voices like Sky Roberts, brother of Virginia Giuffre, demanded full transparency. No deals, no protection, no secrets. But during that press conference, something unusual happened. A military flyover interrupted the event mid-speech. Officials called it routine. But to those present, the timing felt off. Maybe it was coincidence. But in a case already filled with unanswered questions, even small moments like that take on a different weight.
It didn't last very long, the whole entire procedure. It was disgusting. He wasn't mean or anything, but he got up and he said thanks and walked out, and I sat there in bed just horrified and ashamed. It was a wicked time in my life. It was a really scary time in my life. I had just been abused by a member of a royal family.
Then comes the political shift. Donald Trump once campaigned on releasing the Epstein Files, promising full transparency. Now he's calling continued demands a hoax and suggesting the public has already seen enough. That's not a small change. It's a complete reversal. At the same time, his name appears in previously released flight logs. He has denied any wrongdoing, and no charges have been filed. Still, the shift in tone raises questions. Because in a case like this, when narratives change, people start looking closer, not less. Now let's step into the darker corners of this story. The areas fueling speculation online. People have pointed to connections involving Ellen DeGeneres, whose former DJ Steven Twitch boss passed away in 2022, and her ex-partner Nhechi, who died in a car crash that same year. Both had indirect links to broader celebrity circles connected to figures like Sean Diddy Combs, who himself has been linked in discussions around Epstein's wider network. There is no confirmed criminal connection here. But the timing and the overlapping social circles have created an uneasy atmosphere online. And when people tied to this broader narrative begin leaving the country, that unease grows louder. Then there's Jennifer Lopez, whose past is now being pulled back into the spotlight. In 1999, she was present during the Club New York shooting involving Diddy and Shine. She was arrested and later released. Shine was convicted and served time. That's all documented. But now, a lawsuit from producer Lil Rod alleges that Lopez carried a weapon into the club and handed it to Diddy. The claim is unproven, but it's specific. Lopez has not publicly responded. She hasn't addressed Diddy, Epstein, or the allegations, and reports suggest she has since left the country. When you combine past incidents, new claims, public silence, and sudden travel, it creates a narrative that's difficult to ignore. Whether it holds up legally is one question, but how it looks to the public, that's an entirely different story.
But we have a congressional act now to requiring the release, but they're going to say, you know what?
Subject to
Tom
redaction.
Hanks, it's unfair that he was mentioned
And
because
the
he
law
was eating
says
Skittles.
subject to redaction. Subject to redaction.
And we all know what that means. That's to protect.
That's why I'm saying you will never be satisfied with what's released.
This story has moved far beyond Hollywood gossip. At this point, real institutional pressure is building. Leon Botstein, the president of Bard College, is now facing intense scrutiny. DOJ files reveal his name appears more than 2,800 times in Epstein-related correspondence between 2012 and 2018, years after Jeffrey Epstein was already a registered offender. Botstein had previously downplayed his connection, but now the situation is escalating. The College Board has launched an investigation, a major fundraising gala has been postponed, and student protests are growing louder. After more than 50 years in his position, his leadership is finally being questioned. This is what real fallout looks like. It's not just celebrities quietly slipping away to luxury villas. It's powerful institutions being forced to answer for long-standing relationships. Meanwhile, Ghislaine Maxwell remains in a federal prison in Tallahassee, serving a 20-year sentence. But in July 2025, she met with Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche for 2 full days, answering questions about Epstein's network. During those meetings, she reportedly claimed that Donald Trump was not involved in any abuse. Now her credibility is already damaged. She's a convicted perjurer. But the fact that high-level officials are still speaking with her suggests she may hold information they consider valuable. And if she decides cooperation benefits her more than silence, more names could still emerge. So this is where things stand. The discharge petition still needs just 2 signatures. The DOJ still controls the unreleased files, celebrities remain overseas, and victims continue demanding answers. And just when it feels like the story can't go further, another detail surfaces.
But what I've gathered from your articles, this seems to be a global network that Epstein was a part of. And I believe there are multiple Epsteins. Like, I don't believe that Jeffrey Epstein was the head of
absolutely.
the snake. Yeah. Like, they never go after the head of the snake. They never go
Well,
after
the
the
head
head.
of the snake, quote unquote, it's the billionaire class. And so there's a faction of these billionaires in our oligarchy. And of course, the American oligarchy, the American oligarchs don't necessarily, a lot of them don't have an allegiance necessarily to the United States.
But let's pull on a different thread, because while everyone is focused on celebrities leaving the country, something even bigger has been unfolding in the background, and it completely changes how this story looks. The discharge petition is still stuck at 216 signatures. The DOJ is still holding critical files. But the real question now isn't just who flew where. It's who knew what decades ago and chose to do nothing. Take Maria Farmer. She went to the FBI in 1996, yes, 1996, and reported Jeffrey Epstein. She told agents he was involved in exploiting young girls. She said he had stolen photographs of her younger sister. She even claimed he threatened to burn her house down if she spoke out. Her complaint was officially documented on September 3, 1996. It should have triggered immediate action. Instead, she says the agent hung up on her mid-sentence. And then nothing. For 23 years, nothing happened. During that time, Epstein continued building connections, hosting parties, and gaining influence. He operated freely while powerful people continued to associate with him. When the files were finally released decades later, Farmer's complaint was buried among thousands of documents. She called it one of the best days of her life, because it proved she had been telling the truth all along. But she also made one thing clear. The FBI had a chance to stop this early, and they didn't take it.
Interview is and never was part of the Epstein Files. She was sentenced in 2025. This was an interview by Trump's lawyer to protect Trump from the fallout about the Epstein Files. What this really is nothing but a sketchy PR stunt by the Department of Justice. And we have seen this movie before. The Maxwell interview is to the Epstein Files what the Barr letter was to the Mueller investigation.
Now think about what that means for everyone who interacted with Jeffrey Epstein after 1996. Everyone who took his money. Everyone who attended his events. Everyone who flew on his plane. Everyone who chose not to ask questions because he was wealthy, connected, and useful. The warning signs were already there. The information existed. It had been reported to federal authorities. So this wasn't a failure of information, it was a failure of action. And that distinction matters because it means the system didn't just miss the signs. It ignored them. There's another name that hasn't received nearly enough attention, Carol Radziwill. When her name appeared in the Epstein Files, she quickly responded publicly. She acknowledged that she had been close friends with Ghislaine Maxwell for several years in the early 2000s. They attended events together, and Maxwell even photographed her for a book cover. Radziwill insists she never knew Epstein and never witnessed anything inappropriate. She described herself as shocked by what Maxwell later became known for. But here's the problem. Maxwell didn't suddenly change overnight. According to multiple accounts, she had been recruiting for Epstein for years during the same period they were close. So the question becomes unavoidable. What did people around her actually see at the time? What questions were never asked? And why did it take a federal conviction for anyone to start looking back more critically? Because in a story like this, silence isn't just absence. It becomes part of the narrative itself.
Where she talks about her time that she spent with Ghislaine Maxwell. Mm-hmm. And she said she's like the most pure, evil woman. She had no remorse for the victims when, stuff about Jeffrey Epstein would come up on like the news in prison, that she's just a very cold, evil person.
Is she going back on this Housewives show?
No. And Andy's adamant.
Meanwhile, take a look at how someone with nothing to hide handled being named in the files, Tony Hawk. When rumors surfaced claiming he got married on Epstein's island, Hawk didn't wait for damage control. He didn't hire a crisis PR team or release a vague statement. Instead, he responded immediately with proof. He posted clear records of his actual weddings. 1990 in Fallbrook, California, 1996 in San Diego, 2006 in Fiji, and 2015 in Ireland. Then he explained where the confusion likely came from. The photographer at his Fiji wedding was named Mark Epstein, completely unrelated to Jeffrey Epstein. It was fast, direct, transparent, and backed by evidence. That's how a false claim gets shut down. Now compare that to the silence from others. The celebrities who haven't addressed their connections, haven't explained their travel, and haven't responded at all. Hawk showed how simple the truth can look when there's nothing to hide. And that's silence from others. That's exactly why people keep digging deeper. Then there's the legal battle that's turning into its own headline. Donald Trump is reportedly suing the Wall Street Journal for $10 billion. Yes, billion. Over a story claiming he sent a birthday note to Epstein in 2003. The paper stands by the claim, describing the note as including a drawing and the message, "Happy birthday, and may every day be another wonderful secret." Trump denies writing it. But lawsuits at that scale carry serious consequences. They open the door to discovery, a legal process where both sides may be required to hand over documents, emails, and communications. And historically, that's exactly how Epstein-related material has surfaced before. So in trying to fight the claim, Trump may have unintentionally opened the door to even more scrutiny of his past connections. And with depositions already being prepared, this could turn into a very costly move.
The news is breaking right now from the New York Times on Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. They think they've got him this time. They've really got him this time. Here are some highlights. Hold on a second. My team's sending me the name of the article. It's Don's Best Friend: How Epstein and Trump Bonded Over the Pursuit of Women. And left-wing X is going nuts over what's in this.
Now shift your focus to a federal prison in Tallahassee because Ghislaine Maxwell is still there. And suddenly she matters again. In July 2025, she sat down with Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche for 2 full days of questioning. That's not a routine check-in, that's a deep dive. The kind of interview where prosecutors go name by name, detail by detail. Maxwell reportedly told investigators that Donald Trump was not involved in any abuse. But let's be clear, she's a convicted liar serving a 20-year sentence. Her words alone don't carry much weight. What does matter is that the Department of Justice is still talking to her. That means they believe she may have valuable information. And Maxwell has every reason to consider cooperating. 20 years is a long time. And cooperation can change everything. Pressure has a way of making people talk. If she decides that speaking out is her best option, the next wave of names or revelations could come directly from inside that prison. That's the variable many people aren't watching closely enough. At the same time, institutions are starting to crack under pressure. Leon Botstein, president of Bard College, exchanged more than 2,800 emails with Jeffrey Epstein between 2012 and 2018. That's not casual contact. That's a long-term relationship, years after Epstein was already a registered offender. Botstein claims the connection was strictly for fundraising. But the emails suggest more. They show Epstein being invited to campus, visits to his townhouse, and even plans involving his island. Now the consequences are real. The Bard Board of Trustees has launched an investigation. A major fundraiser has been postponed, and student protests are growing. After 50 years in leadership, Botstein is now facing the possibility that his legacy could be defined not by what he built, but by who he chose to associate with. That's not celebrity gossip. That's institutional damage unfolding in real time.
As we've seen dozens of new photos we haven't seen before of Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell with very high-profile people, celebrities, people like Mick Jagger and Michael Jackson, like you showed, also like British royalty and actors. All of that we sort of knew was happening. I want to highlight specifically two for the public interest, and that is President Clinton and President.
This is the side of the scandal that rarely makes headlines. It's not about celebrities hiding in luxury villas. It's about institutions being forced to confront uncomfortable truths. It's about a college president watching decades of work come under scrutiny because of thousands of emails. It's about a university asking whether a lifetime of service outweighs a long-standing connection to a convicted offender. The investigation into Leon Botstein is expected to take 2 to 3 months, and that clock is already ticking. When the report is released, he either survives it or he doesn't. But one thing is certain, Bard College won't be the same. And Bard is just one example. Jeffrey Epstein's network extended into academia, finance, media, and politics. The bigger question now is how many other institutions are sitting on similar connections, and how many will act before another wave of documents forces their hand. So here's where things stand. The discharge petition still needs 2 signatures. The DOJ still controls the remaining files. Celebrities are still overseas. A convicted figure in federal prison could still decide to cooperate. And a major college presidency is hanging in the balance. At the same time, the FBI has a nearly 30-year-old complaint that, if handled differently, might have prevented much of this from ever happening. And every time the story starts to feel clear, another layer appears. Another connection. Another unanswered question. Another denial that doesn't quite hold up. A full release of the files would either confirm the official narrative or completely dismantle it. Either way, one thing is clear. The people who left aren't waiting to find out. They've already made their move.
Or if you tend towards cynicism or skepticism, you might wonder, is everything about Epstein and his powerful male friends, is that coming out? That remains.
And the truth is, the story isn't over. Not even close. The petition could gain those final 2 signatures at any moment. Ghislaine Maxwell could decide to talk. The DOJ could release another batch of files, possibly with names no one expected. Right now, the only people who seem certain about what's coming next are the ones who have already left. And they're not saying much. So now it comes down to this. Do you think the full files will ever actually be released? And if they are, which public figure stands to lose the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments. This story is still unfolding, and we're staying on it.